Technical difficulties?
When I'm here, I use him, and when I'm home, I use my son.
There you go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to have everybody out tonight. Thank you for coming. As you can see, we're missing a few members of our City Council tonight, but we are going to go ahead and get underway as of now. The mayor is actually out of town, so he will not be coming tonight. I'm Councilmember Chris Snell, and I am Mayor Pro Tem for this year, so I will be conducting tonight's meeting. Councilmember Susan Lee may be late tonight, but apparently her son just returned from a mission, so she may or may not be here tonight. So she may be late, and then Councilmember Adams is also going to be late. So we're going to go ahead and get underway since it's 7 o'clock. The agenda begins with an opening, which Mayor Hyatt indicated I'll give the opening tonight. So I'll go ahead and give that opening, after which we'll have Bridger Johnson, grandson of former council member Mark Johnson, who's in the audience tonight, who will, as a scout, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Our kind Heavenly Father, we humbly bow our heads before Thee this evening and express gratitude for the opportunity to gather together tonight to discuss the business that's before the City Council. We're grateful to live in this community, Father, grateful to live in this free country. We thank Thee for the freedoms that we enjoy and are grateful for those who labor so hard to preserve those freedoms, for our police and fire, as well as our military. We thank Thee for the blessing it is to have the freedoms we have, and pray that we may do all in our part to be responsible citizens, that we may conduct our meeting tonight in accordance with the rules and also in accordance with Thy will, that we may be able to treat each other with kindness and with understanding, even when we disagree. We are mindful of those who are suffering and who have experienced tragedies this week. We're also mindful of the presence of hate. And we pray, Father, that those who have been victimized will be comforted, and pray that we may all look inward to make sure that we are eradicating hate and feelings of ugliness from ourselves. And we thank Thee for our many blessings, and we say these things humbly in the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Will the audience please arise? Repeat the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Bridger. Appreciate that very much. Before we begin tonight's meeting, we'll start with introductions.
Jake Garn, City Council.
I introduced myself already, but I'm Chris Snell from the City Council and will be tonight's conductor of the meeting.
And Larry Page, City Council.
Shane Scott, City Manager.
Maria Devereaux, City Recorder.
Andy Thompson, Engineer.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the second item on the agenda is the call to the public. This is the opportunity for you as the public to address the council with and express your thoughts or concerns about any topic of your choice. We ask that you simply stand up here at the microphone so that you can be recorded and clearly state your name for the record, and then you are welcome to go ahead and express your thoughts and comments. To keep the meeting agenda going and moving along, we ask that you limit yourself and your comments to 3 minutes. Our city recorder here, Maria, will be timing, and as she gives a signal, she may raise her hand or say a comment in the microphone to indicate that your time is getting close to being up. We ask that you wrap up your comments and allow for the next person in line to make comments. With that introduction being done, we'll go ahead now and open the microphone for call to the public.
I know the mayor's not here, so I think he didn't want to come on purpose because I gave him the candy bars last meeting. And the thing that I had, I'm Dean Wall, I'm sorry. The thing that I had to bring up was on the signs, the no parking signs. My understanding was that they were going to be up before school started, and I've driven around and I haven't seen any change in that. So other than that, you're doing a good job, all of you.
Thank you, Dean. We'll try to get a comment on that after call to public.
Hello, Chris, Council. Clark Terry from 1149 Handline Circle. To talk a little bit about what's on the agenda for the flood control down in the ponds, the Rouchet Ponds. Is this the right time to do that?
Actually, I mean, you're welcome to give comments on that. When it comes to that agenda item, those who are involved in that particular agenda items, all the neighbors who are involved in that will have an opportunity to speak.
So we should do that later?
So you and not be limited to the 3 minutes, basically. So yeah, but you're more than welcome to comment now, but you can comment on that.
I'll wait till later.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Clark.
Hi, my name is Tammy Worston, and I've come once again to talk about pickleball. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I wanted to give you an update on how things are going with the pickleball courts. They're absolutely beautiful. I want you to know that they're used every single day of the week, morning and night. There's a little small window in the middle of the day when it's the hottest that they're not being used. Most of the time, I see that all 8 courts are full with people waiting. I've seen up to 20 people waiting to get on the courts. They're used from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. And lucky for us, we share the courts. So if you ever go on to play pickleball and the courts are full, know that we share them. And anyway, they are being used so well, and we're so excited about that. The first week that the courts were being used in the evening, I saw all the courts full, and I didn't even know anybody that was there, and I thought I knew the pickleball players in our area. So there's a lot of closet pickleball players that have been hiding. So I'm so happy to have it out there, and people can come and use that from our community. We're making new friends every day as we go play pickleball. The lights were up and going last week. I've got to say that when we went there with Cole Stevens at 9:30 at night, one night, it was really emotional for me to see those lights go on and have it lit up as if it was daytime there. So anyway, so excited and so happy for that. So thank you for that. Just wanted to mention that Tracy Murray from the Recreation Department has done a fabulous job running the leagues morning and evening throughout the summer, and she just finished running the city's first pickleball tournament last week. The tournament went on for 4 days, and it was a huge success. All I could hear from everybody was, when's the next tournament? It was so fun. The thing that really makes me smile is to know that the people that participated in that tournament had the age span from 11 years old to 84 years old, and all competing against each other. So fun. Love that. We had 20 or more volunteers that helped us, and we had about 204 participants that competed in multiple divisions, coming as far away as Brigham City and Utah County. I know that the restaurants and grocery stores were being frequented by the players. Old Grist Mill offered a buy one, get one free meal for the participants, and I took a picture when I went there for lunch, and there were about 15 to 20 people, pickleball players, all there enjoying lunch together. So we thank Old Grist Mill for being so generous. I want to compliment Cole Stevens on being so willing to listen to the pickleball players all along the way. He is a very hard worker, and he needs a raise. Give him a raise. So he's been so supportive.
Thank
so
you.
Once again, I want to, pardon me? Okay, time's up. Thank you again so much. Appreciate it.
Would anybody else like to make a comment during the call to the public? You didn't use up your 3 minutes, Dean, so...
I used up my 3 minutes?
No, you didn't.
Okay. One more thing. I got my soft ice cream set up. I'm Dean Wall again. I got my soft ice cream set up, so if any of the city council wants to leave and go get some soft ice cream, it's just 1 block east of here, okay?
Oh, no.
I'm Mark Johnson, a citizen of Kaysville, but also a member of the Board of Trustees of the Central Davis Sewer District. And as you know, the UDOT is planning to take some of the property on the west side of the sewer district for the new West Davis corridor. Kaysville City is also interested in acquiring some of the property to the east of the sewer treatment plant. And I just want to make sure that you understand that when all that acreage is taken, it will cause the sewer district to have to alter the way treatment of water occurs, because we use all that acreage for distributing biosolids, and we won't have that land anymore. And so as a result, that's going to cause us to have to redesign or change the way water treatment occurs there at a potential cost of several $1 million, which will be borne by citizens of Kaysville, Farmington, and Fruit Heights. So in your deliberations as a city council, I hope that you'll be very conscious of that there's some severe costs associated with those decisions. So be sensitive to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Would anybody else like to make a comment during the call to the public? Not seeing any, we'll go ahead and move on then from call to the public. Cole, we'll have to have a chat about getting people to argue for a raise for you in public. But
Denied.
Andy, would you mind, could you make a comment as to the parking north of Davis High School?
Yes. The signs have been ordered. They're expected to be here tomorrow. They'll begin installing those as soon as they arrive. They said it'll take them maybe a day and a half to get them up. So by the first part of next week, we'll for sure see some of the changes. They hope to have it complete by Tuesday. If it goes into early Wednesday, that may happen. We received the car hanging things. Sorry. The permits.
The permit.
We received those today. A letter went out in the mail just today as well to the residents in that affected area, outlining what the regulations are and how to obtain the permit.
Okay, so the signs will be installed over the course of the next
couple days.
Several days.
Yes. We're probably a week later than we'd like to be, but it's all up and running and ready to go.
Okay. And how would citizens acquire a rear view mirror hangy thing, is what you called it, the technical term?
That is the technical term. The permits will be available here at City Hall for those within the area that has restrictions placed on it. They will have to verify that they actually are a resident there.
Uh-huh. Okay. Thank you. All right. Wonderful. Next item on the agenda is a contract with JRCA Architects, Inc. for the old library building. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. We have a proposal here, a contract with GRC Architects. They've been working for the city the last few years on a variety of projects. We engaged them to start discussions with us on some potential work in the old library because of their familiarity with that building specifically. We worked with Scott Holmes, who is here tonight. If we have some questions for him, he's happy to address those. And it's come to the point where we've engaged them over the last several months, and it's time to formalize that relationship between us. And he is in your packet, if you look, there's a contract with them, a potential contract for the work that we'd like to do at the old library. We are yet to decipher exactly what we're doing there. We're still going through that process, but we'd like to enter into this contract with GRCA to continue that good work.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Scott. Council, does anybody have any clarifying questions of technical nature to either ask Mr. Scott or the other Mr. Scott in the room regarding this contract or JRCA and their involvement? Not hearing any, then I'd welcome a motion.
I'll move that we accept these computers. I go too many different places. That we accept the contract with and approve the contract with JRCA for purposes of doing the old library development plans.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the contract by Mr. Garn.
And I'll second that motion.
A second by Mr. Page. Thank you. Now that we have a motion and a second on the table, it is time for discussion. As per our rules, each member of the council is allowed up to 5 minutes, and I emphasize up to 5 minutes. Not necessary to take all that time if you don't need to discuss and express your opinions and thoughts on the matter. We'll start here with Mr. Page.
Okay. Believe it or not, I read through the contract, but I really don't see anything that's out of line or I actually have a question on. I think it's pretty straightforward. I know that the city has a pretty good relationship with them, and they've already done some work on this, and I've actually been a part of this to a certain degree, and so I'm anxious to move forward on this and excited that we can move forward and get it started later this year.
Okay, excellent. I also will just take a moment to just express that JRCA has been involved, for some time in the discussion centering around the old library building, and we had a committee meeting, a committee that met and discussed some of the thoughts from the citizens. It got input from the citizens regarding what to do with the old library building, and I think it's a good opportunity for us to formalize the relationship with JRCA in this effort, and recognize that this old library building is there's a need to use the space. We have the building there. It's been sitting basically unoccupied for 2 years or so, and yet we have people in City Hall that are sitting on each other's laps almost with the space constraints. So I think it's a good idea to get moving on that. Obviously, that discussion, the nuts and bolts of what will happen to the library building is not what's up for discussion tonight per se. It's basically just to formalize our relationship with JRCA and their efforts in that regard. So I'm in improvement here as well. So.
Yeah, and I really don't have anything to add other than just agreement that it's time to move forward. There's cost to letting buildings just sit too. So this is the next step in getting it done.
Yes, and just so the public is aware that according to the contract, what is the dollar value?
I believe it's $44,312. Is that right, Scott?
And it's anticipated to the duration is
until the project's done. That's a good question, and I think it's going to depend on. And please, Scott, feel free if the mayor is okay with that.
Yes, please.
Sorry, we anticipate the construction to begin later this year, sometime in hopefully November or December. So our contract duration, I believe I listed it as a 6-month period. If it does If for some reason the project extends beyond that or you decide to put it on hold, we have a 6-month period to work underneath this agreement. So.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Not hearing any further comments, or actually I think everybody's basically commented and used up their time. We'll call for a vote. We have a motion and a second, so we'll begin over here with Mr. Garn.
Aye.
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 The motion is passed 3 votes to 0. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is item number 4, bucket truck purchase for the Parks and Recreation Department. I believe we're turning the time over, in this case, to Mr. Cole Stevens, the Parks and Rec Director. The man who needs a raise.
That was not solicited. But no, so Cole Stevens with Parks and Recreation. Just a brief overview on kind of the staff report and why this purchase is necessary. Basically, our current bucket truck that we have was deemed inoperable by the mechanics back in the spring of this year. And that's a truck that we use within the park system to do all of our tree trimming, also all of our lights, whether it's the holiday lighting or lights in the parks, things of that nature. And so this piece of equipment is very crucial to our operations within the parks and with the trees that we have. And so with our new budget year, there was approved the purchase of what we termed a used bucket truck. And with that process, we began that process in July and soliciting quotations and stuff from bucket trucks. Very difficult piece of equipment to find in a condition that meets what we're looking for. How many miles does it have on it? How old is it? Some of the things are outlined in the staff report. Staff is recommending the use of a used 2011 Dodge 4500 chassis, basically a truck with a Alltech boom, 40-foot boom on it for $61,500. The truck does come with a 30-day service agreement with the company that anything that occurs within that first 30 days will be repaired by Alltech, who we're purchasing it from.
Okay.
So that's basically it.
That's your staff report. Thank you, Cole. It's now time for the council. You're welcome to sit down. You may be called upon to answer questions. Does anybody have any questions for clarification from Cole?
Yeah, I'll start. So, generally speaking, I'm not familiar with buying bucket trucks, but buying cars, you can generally, in most cases, get a little better deal and avoid some of the depreciation from a new car if you buy one that's still very functional, but used car, a lot of that depreciation has already dropped off. Is that kind of the idea here? Why, as you did the assessment, maybe looking at a new bucket truck versus a used one?
Yes, especially in the parks side of things where, we're different than the power department where they're up against power lines and things that it's very critical that things, so yes, for us buying a used bucket truck made sense, just from a cost perspective. And that was what led us to all these different things that we were looking at: age, mileage, who was the previous owner, how well was it taken care of prior to coming to us, because we don't want to buy, of course, a used one. There's lots of things that could go wrong, but basically, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No.
The only question I have is how often do you use them? I mean, days a year or?
So during let's just call it the holiday lighting season, from the time we typically start putting up our holiday lights right around middle of October, it's used pretty much daily from there until the holiday lighting, which is the Monday after Thanksgiving. Throughout the course of the year, it probably goes out 2 to 3 days per week for anywhere from 2 to 3 hours per day. During the summer months, it's used the least because we're not really actively trimming trees during the summer, just because it's so hot and it's not good for the trees to be trimmed when it's 100 degrees. So in the spring, a lot more than it, but I would say on an average, throughout the course of a whole year, it would be 2 to 3 days per week. And it varies hours, but 3 to 4 hours per time out.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No, that's it.
Okay. My question was, the staff report indicates that the purchase of for this 2011 used Altec bucket truck is $61,500. What was the budget that was budgeted for this purchase?
The budget for this purchase was $65,000.
So we're about $3,500 or so under budget.
Yeah, and the actual price, the listing price that they were asking for this truck was $62,900, but we, negotiated it down to $61,500, and that's being delivered to us here in Kaysville.
They're bringing it. It's not being driven here to Kaysville, or is it being?
It either will be driven here or transported. It's up to Altec to determine how they want to deliver it to us. But either option, we've accepted. Either they can drive it or transport it on the bed of a truck, however they prefer.
And where's it coming from?
It's coming out of California. There was no bucket trucks in the state of Utah. A couple companies said they could build us one, taking parts from different bucket trucks, but that really wasn't appealing to try to mesh a truck together. Would prefer to have one that was deemed operable and whatnot. So, and Altec's a reputable company. That's the same company that we purchased our current bucket truck from about 10 years ago.
Okay, thank you, Cole. If no further questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Well, I'll move that we purchase the bucket truck for $61,500.
I'll second that.
We have got a motion by Mr. Page and a second by Mr. Garn. I have the sense that we likely won't need to have further discussion on it, so I'll simply open it up to anybody having further discussion. Then I'll call for a vote. I'll start. Aye.
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 Excellent. Motion passes 3-0. Okay, next item on the agenda is the consideration for the discharge of shotguns for the purpose of pheasant hunting as permitted within Kaysville City. And I think we wanted to change that for basically not just pheasant hunting, it's for the discharge of shotguns in West Kaysville. But Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We did get a little specific on that agenda item, and I think we're covered if the motion doesn't say we can only hunt pheasants. I think we'd be okay there. But Mr. Jeff Holmes is petitioning the council for permission to hunt again for the third year in a row on his property. I think we've had no problems with this use in the past. We've had our police chief look into this again and do some due diligence there and feel comfortable with the request as it's proposed. I did make a recommendation in the staff report to be able to grant the city manager or the police chief the permission to grant the permission to be able to hunt, but I was reminded that we have an ordinance that actually says that the city council will hear any such request on an annual basis. So we'd have to actually change the ordinance to do that. So if that's something you're interested in the future, we can do that. But I think for this request, we're covered and would recommend that you allow this hunting of any kind that is in season and with a licensed hunter. I don't know how specific you need to get there, but we're comfortable with that.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Does anybody have any technical questions? I have just one, and that's how specific do we need to get on this motion? There really isn't anything in the packet itself. It's not like we're adopting a resolution or adopting some formal document. My understanding is that it's the discharge of shotguns being allowed in West Kaysville, but West Kaysville is everything west of I-15, so it's not necessarily everything in West Kaysville. So how specific do we need to get on a motion to adopt?
That Andy just put in the map of the area. I think if we use the property in the map as a guide, that might be a good way to go. It is private property.
It's private property, and it's very far west of existing, or quite far west of existing development. I believe it's out west of the Ruche Lane area. Is that correct, Andy?
No, this is 200 north.
What's even further out?
This is the new school, so it's just on the very edge, at the bottom of Second North or along Schick
It's
Lane.
further north than what I was saying. Okay.
At least this is based on last year's request, which we believe is the same request.
Okay. And Mr. Holmes, did you want to make any comments or address the council in any way?
It's pretty straightforward, self-explanatory. It is on private land. It's in an area that we've had access to for years and years until we've been encroached upon and things have been rezoned. But yeah, I think even within the next few years that'll disappear with the development of the freeway going through there. It goes right through that purple parcel. So yeah, we'd like to have the opportunity for a couple more years is all.
Well, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other technical questions? All right, then I would invite a motion.
I move that we approve hunting in the listed area on the map for Mr. Holmes.
I'll second that motion. We've got a motion by Mr. Garn and a second by Mr. Snell. Any further discussion necessary? Not hearing any, we'll go ahead and start with a vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. The motion passes 3-0. Thank you, Mr. Holmes. You're probably right. I think they're saying West Davis Corridor 2020 is when that starts, so use the property as much as you can. So, thank you. Next item on the agenda is number 6, the Utopia Franchise Agreement Petition. Shane.
Yes, we do have a representative from Utopia here. Appreciate him coming. Just really briefly, the petition has been received by Utopia for a franchise agreement. This doesn't make us a Utopia city. It allows Utopia to do business in our city. I think they have some contracts they'd like to see and be able to bid on. And there's no financial or infrastructure obligation that the city has in any way. This is a franchise agreement just like any other utility might have in our city. And they've done a very good job of following our procedure, which I think we've included in the packet very closely. And this has been reviewed by myself, by Mr. Story, Finance Director, as well as Mr. King, our legal advisor. So.
Okay, thank you for that introduction. I'll go ahead and allow Mr. Timmerman, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, to go ahead and speak, and then we can ask any technical questions. Is there anything else you'd like to add to Mr. Scott's introduction?
Just to say that, he described it properly. Just treat us like any other telecommunications company. What happens is that we have infrastructure along the entire north border of the city with Layton City being built out. We also have a route going right through the city that's our main backbone with lots of capacity on it, and we're also building a lot of route in Farmington City. And so it's kind of this island where we haven't been able to address any need there, be it schools, businesses, governmental agencies, and things like that. Churches, we actually turned away a church that was right on the border because it was on the wrong side of the border. We just want to remove the obstacle. We're not, the city wouldn't be participating in any of the funding of any of these projects. We would be funding them. But whenever we talk about Utopia, usually the conversation goes towards, well, what does this mean later? And that would just be that any infrastructure that gets built and paid for by Utopia today, these networks are community owned when we build them. And so if the city has any needs for fiber connectivity or ever wanted to pursue anything, the cost for doing so later would be less because there would be more infrastructure having been built and paid for previously. So we do see it as a big benefit to the city, a little different than any other telecommunications provider coming in, but we're not really asking for any support towards that today, or ever really. That would be a different discussion.
Okay. So I'll open it now to technical questions. I'll ask mine. You're asking us to treat you like any other utility, any other telecommunications utility. So, Comcast or a Verizon or some other telecommunications entity that does business currently has a franchise license with Kaysville, Utopia would just be among those. And having, is that correct?
It is. We're a little bit of a different animal. We kind of be treated the same, but what happens is when we start talking about taxes and things like that, they do still apply the same as they would for others, except that the retail bill gets billed by a service provider partner. So like an ex-mission company or a Veracity or something like that is actually billing retail services, but the obligation to pay the same municipal telephone tax, for example, we still have the obligation to make sure that's paid. So you'll see that in the agreement that is still there and the obligation's on us, but how the money flows is in partnership with the service provider. That makes sense.
Okay. Other technical questions?
So that's interesting. I was trying to do a little bit of research on Utopia. So you're more like the infrastructure provider, and then other, like you mentioned, Exhibition, others can then lease that infrastructure from you?
Yeah, so in some instances we do it directly where we can, and that's for governmental agencies or partnerships, things like that. And then for other purposes, we can't really just offer retail services to the public generally, and there's restrictions in the Utah Code from municipal projects doing that or interlocal agencies, unless it does it in partnership with private companies. So what happens is when we build routes, what happens is there's about 10 retail residential providers and about 30 business providers that kind of treat our fiber infrastructure as theirs. And so they would come and say, hey, I want to connect to this business, and so we'll build into that business, and they'll get services from X-Mission. If they don't like them, then they'll switch to Veracity. If they don't like them, they'll switch to someone else. They have all of this choice, but rather than 30 companies building in your right-of-ways, it's just Utopia Fiber, and all of these other companies use that.
So does that include Google Fiber also, or do they put in separate infrastructure for that?
They are not a Utopia service provider. They have done some partnerships with cities to use open access fiber, but they have not yet done that with us.
And of course, these questions are not really relevant to the matter before us, which is very straightforward and essentially is just franchise, maybe liability or something to use the existing utility corridors and be able to put your fiber in. But is there anything I actually think a lot of people would, in Kaysville, would enjoy having the opportunity to have fiber connection. Is there any plans in the future to maybe do that for Kaysville?
Absolutely. Basically what it means, what it requires is that if 30% of the city was interested in signing up, the normal fee structure that we charge is enough revenue to cover the debt for building the whole system. So that's a break-even point. So when we go into these projects and we say if we're starting from scratch to do a city, if there's a 30% demand, then the city doesn't even need to bond for it. Utopia has the bonding ability, but there's a partnership where the city pledges against the bond tied to the project in that city. And a 30% take rate, the whole cost of the project is covered from the revenues, and the bonds are paid, and all the operational costs and replacement and upgrades and repairs and all that are covered. So usually what we start with is let's just kind of get started with some of the low-hanging fruit of getting into businesses and things, and there's no obligation from the city. I would recommend, and we're doing this in several other cities right now, and that is to gauge the level of interest for the service. And if it comes out that the service hits that 30% threshold, project breaks even, and we could even phase it in or do something like that. For comparison, I'm very interested in having this conversation. It's a little bit outside the scope, but just for a point of reference, in Layton City and the neighborhoods that border Kaysville, we're expecting about a 45% take rate. So if the demographics and the demand and things are similar in Kaysville as they are in Layton, it more than pays for itself without any shortfall coming back to the city. Now, if you go read some newspapers, you're going to see that Utopia has a financial shortfall. That shortfall is based on the projects up until 2009. All of the bonds that we've done since 2009, which are 3 bonds totaling $65 million, the revenue from those are doubling the debt service and operational costs for all of those projects. So we actually have a 7-year track record to show that these projects do pay for themselves. So we actually budgeted dividends back to the cities this year from those profits.
Thank you.
Any other
All right.
questions?
No, so it sounds like to me that immediately you'd probably get going to try to take advantage of the businesses and different things like that, provide them service. And then I guess the expansion of it would determine really if the people would want it and stuff like that.
Yeah, there may be a few pockets right along the border that we would just incorporate into the existing areas. So there is a potential to serve some pockets of residential adjacent to what we already have. But as far as a more comprehensive build-out, that would require city involvement. So really what we're looking at is maybe just a few pockets along the north border, but then hitting the business corridors through the city, also the schools, and then the city itself, if you have need for connectivity to, say, substations and city facilities, we're very interested in providing that. A lot of the other projects we've done outside of our founding cities have been that sort of thing. So we have, our founding cities is 11 cities really that back the first bonds, but we have fiber routes and connections in about 30 to 35 cities in the state. So it doesn't have to be fiber to the home. There's opportunities for us to come in and provide a good service short of an all-in type of a project.
All right. Well, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for answering the questions. Okay, I don't know. Any other technical questions? Mm-hmm. Then I would welcome a motion at this point.
Well, I'll move that we adopt the franchise agreement with Utopia Fiber Networks.
I'll second that.
Okay. Council members, any need for further discussion on the matter? Not seeing any, we'll go ahead and start with a vote.
Aye.
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 Excellent. The motion passes 3-0. Thank you. And I think down the road there could be, just knowing the buzz I hear, from talking to neighbors, friends, and even seeing some postings on Facebook from time to time, there's a fair amount of interest in people getting more options for their internet service.
And I would just say you're really well situated for it. I mean, where we have all of Centerville City is built out and Layton is being very aggressively built out. For us, it just geographically makes a lot of sense. We also see the demand, so we're very interested in having those conversations with you.
Excellent. It's always great, I think, to give more options to folks. So thank you. All right, excellent. Thanks. We'll move now to.
Small thing, last chance if you want to come and have ice cream.
Oh, shoot. Sorry I couldn't get this meeting done in time, Dean. Sorry about that. Okay. Item number 7, the Rouchet Lane Ponds owner agreements. Mr. Scott.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Well, let me kick this off. For the last several months, the city staff has engaged the owners of the ponds there. We call the Rouchet Lane ponds. There's an overhead view of those. In an effort to address some of the needs that we have mutually, both the city and the ponds owners in conducting some work there. One of the items, as if you remember when we talked about this several months ago, one of the items that we'd like to do first is just have an agreement that we're working cohesively and that we what the city's responsibilities are and what the ponds owners' responsibilities might be as well. I think we've had some really productive and wonderful meetings, and we have an agreement here for your review tonight. We did have some last-minute changes to it, and I think myself and Mr. King from our legal team met and discussed those changes, and we incorporated those the best we can. I think from the city's perspective, this agreement is ready to go. I don't think the owners have seen how we adopted their changes, so that may be the only caveat to this discussion. So maybe my recommendation would be to either, one, pass the agreement as is and allow them the opportunity to look at it and verify that we did incorporate their changes correctly, or two, have a discussion about this agreement. If there are any questions or concerns, we can address those and then adopt it at a later date. I think either one of those would work for us. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I think we do have some folks here that would like to speak to the agreement.
We clearly do have some folks here who would like to speak to the matter. My question of a technical nature is the agreement that we have in our packet, does that reflect the changes that the neighbors wanted to incorporate?
It does.
Okay.
Again, it reflects the changes that they want to incorporate as we incorporated them. So a lot of times, I think maybe Mr. King said, okay, here's your concern, and he addressed it how he would address it, and then we wanted to make sure that they would have the chance to look at it.
Okay, but you don't have feedback from them on whether or not they liked how it was interpreted into the contract?
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions of clarification from council? Okay, then I think before we move to a motion, I'd like to have the neighbors go ahead and stand up and address maybe some of their concerns before we make motions and an effort to proceed in that regard. So, Mr. Terry or any of the other neighbors who would like to stand up, please. Now, you're not limited to 3 minutes now.
Okay.
So,
well, I may be, because my wife said, you got to go up there and talk and get back, because I have a whole house full of guests. So I kind of jumped the gun.
Excellent.
Anyway, I just want to start by saying thank you to Shane, Andy, and some of the council members. They've spent a lot of time. I think Shane was kind of modest in saying he spent a couple of months at this. We've talked for at least a year. We've gathered as a neighborhood with the city. Several of the council members have been involved. Had a very nice call from Dave Adams to ask what we were doing, and he was very helpful in just wanting to understand what we were trying to accomplish. And that is what I explained to him, was that we have a situation where the city's growing. We have more and more storm drains, more concrete, more water coming down through those ponds, which take a significant amount of the Kaysville City storm water and send it out to the Great Salt Lake. So we've talked from a lot of different perspectives, kind of far apart in the beginning, and we've really come together with this agreement. We're pretty happy with what we've seen, assuming that those last changes were put in place. The idea was that if we could get an agreement, at least an agreement in principle, that would be enough for the city council to say, let's now go to the next step and get some bids and see what this would really take to get it done. So, looking from the extremes, working in, we talked about, well, what would it cost for the city to pipe their water all the way to the lake? And 4,000 feet of 30-inch or bigger pipe, millions of dollars. Obviously, the city's not interested in doing that. We could sit back from the owner's perspective and just hope that nothing floods, and be prepared with attorneys if it does, and we could all end up unhappy with each other as neighbors and as city. And so what we've come together with so far is that we would have the city expand the capacity of the water going out of the ponds, rather than trying to control what God sends down in moisture. You can't really control how much water is coming through, but you can control how much is going out. And so a lot of the flooding that we've had is because we don't have enough capacity getting the water out of the ponds. So that's part of the issue. The other issue we're dealing with is we have situations where a lot of water comes through at once. It's carrying a lot of debris and sediments, and it causes erosion on the neighboring properties, causes damage to our properties that way, as well as it's filling up our properties with dirt. So the city may have the right to send water through, but they don't have the right to, as I understand it, to just fill our ponds up with dirt and take no action. So we've kind of come together in saying that we're agreeing that the city will remove some of that dirt one time and increase the capacity to get the water out and relieve themselves of some of the liability. And there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of people involved, so I feel pretty good about the fact that, you know, when you can get a dozen different entities to say, okay, we like this agreement, let's move forward and get some bids. I feel like we've accomplished a lot in the last year, and the next step would be for the city to go out and get some bids to move forward. So that's all I have to say, and I got to run. So I'll let my neighbors speak if they'd like to.
Go save your wife.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Anyone else care to address the council on the topic?
Hi, my name is Scott Hershey. I'm one of the owners along the pond number 3 there. I'd like to thank the city and the workers for the attentive nature and trying to get ahead of this thing and make it work. I think the agreement that is in place is the thoughts and processes of a lot of people. I think it's well overdue, and as we continue to see the fast growth that is taking place, we need to do it fairly quickly. We've had some interesting rains, and we're really not set up. This was built upon the situation of a farming community, and with all that water coming down off those cement driveways and roadways now, that it just has no place to go. And so there's some pretty good stream of water that comes through these ponds that just continues to increase over time. The one thing about the agreement, and I'm really okay with the agreement, I still feel there's maybe a couple of things. I've just learned over my lifetime, if you don't deal in specifics, a lot of times you get general results. And so there's still a couple of things I'd like to work out, a couple of us with Shane, as we're 90% there, but I think there's a few specifics we need to get there. As far as we've talked about some cleaning and different things, but what does that mean? Is that 2 hours with a backhoe along the edge, or is that a little more extensive? I would just like a little more clarification before it's finalized. But in general terms, I think we're 90% there. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. Anything? Okay. Mr. Jones doesn't want to speak. All right. So thank you for your comments. Thank you. Mr. Terry has already left, but that's very helpful. Council members, we'll go ahead and maybe start here again, where with just 3 of us, it goes around pretty quickly. So,
okay.
No, actually, I'll invite a motion before we get discussion going. So,
well, I'll make a motion that we approve the Roche Lane Ponds Agreement.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second to the motion?
So, a process question before I second it.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Hershey mentioned that there's still a couple of things that need to be worked out. Can that still be done if we approve the agreement as written this evening?
Personally, I would feel not terribly comfortable with that. Maybe staff can have an answer to that. Andy, looked like you were getting ready to say something.
You can approve it. If there's changes to the agreement, then that's not what you approved, and it has to come back and be approved again anyway.
We approve the amendment. Yeah, that's what I thought.
So if we approve the agreement tonight, I mean, I think. Sorry, this is we've got a motion.
I'll second it so we can discuss it.
So we can discuss it. Okay, excellent. So we've got a motion by Mr. Page. We've got a second by Mr. Garn. Now we can have council discussion on the matter. Mr. Page.
Just a couple questions, clarification. First of all, how long has the city been putting their storm water down through that, through those ditches? I guess originally it's a creek that runs down there, right? Is that correct? And
there's no main channel that feeds those ponds. Some ditches and other drainage areas. As far as I know, that's been part of the drainage system forever.
I think what's changed is that you just have so much water flow so much more because there's so many impervious surfaces that are dumping stormwater into the channel.
Mr. Page, did you have further comments?
Just the comment. Have these ponds always been there? I mean, they've been there a long time, or is this something that the citizens decided to make, to improve their living environment? Or
from the information I've seen and been able to obtain, there's always been a low spot in this area. I think the ponds have been improved over the years so that they have standing water instead of just a swamp area.
Right.
But there's always been at least one or two ponds of some size and then some swampy area that I think they just improved for their use.
Okay. Mr. Garn. Was you done with me? Okay. Mr. Garnell.
No, I'm sorry, I forgot our new rules of order. You know that I need to be recognized by the chair, and certainly want to make sure that Councilmember Page has completed his questions as well. But I think, back to Mr. Hershey's comment, I had some of the same questions, not necessarily that the specifics need to be in the agreement. And the reason I say that is there's, in reading it, there's some, as I read through it, there's some expectations there that certain things will occur. So the specifics have to take place in order for those more general concepts to be met within the agreement. For example, I think there's a section in there that talks about the stormwater that's coming in, bringing debris or refilling up, that could potentially refill up the ponds, that there will be constructed filters of some kind that will filter out at least some of that and slow down or eliminate the rebuilding of the silt. And also that will be evaluated. So there could be some responsibility if the city's still filling back up the ponds. And maybe I'll put that in a question form. Is that true? Did I interpret that correctly in reading it?
I think that was the intent, yes.
Yeah. So that relieves my mind a lot that, the agreement satisfactory to, and it makes perfect sense. I'm totally for it, because that is when the city puts stormwater into that system, and it could potentially flood private property, to take care of that so that it can flow through makes perfect sense. All other improvements that property owners may want to make, included in the agreement to those ponds, will be their responsibility, but the city's taking care of their responsibility. So with that, that's my comment.
Mr. Chair,
yes.
Might I respond also to
yes.
Councilmember Garn's comment?
Please do.
I think one section on here at the bottom of page 2 that I think addresses Mr. Hershey's concern a little bit, and it may not address it all the way, but it says, this agreement will be void in its entirety if the parties are unable to clarify and agree on the scope of the projects. So he's right that we were pretty vague in the things that we were going to do. And I think the reason we were doing that is it was kind of a cart before the horse situation, where rather than say, this is exactly what we're going to do between ponds 2 and 3, we wanted to scope that out a little bit better and maybe do that as part of the bid process as well. But we didn't want to go through that process until we had an agreement in place that we felt like we were all on the same page about it. So it's kind of like we didn't want to go too far down one road. So we were hoping that section just continuing to engage with the residents and agreeing on the scope. And he's right. We always say is dredge pond 1, dredge south end of pond 2. We're pretty vague, and that's true. I would also counter though that we were kind of vague by design.
And if, Mr. Chair, if I may make one more comment about that. Whether it's law or agreements, I mean, certainly the situation determines how much specificity is needed, but the only thing worse than being too general is being too specific. For example, if you say in the agreement, we will do 2 hours worth of backhoe time in this section of the pond, and actually you need 3 hours or you only need 1 hour or whatever, then by being too specific, you actually lock yourself in a way that may be counterproductive. So anyway, just a comment.
Okay. I just have, I guess a procedural question that sounds like staff would like to have the agreement adopted as it is here, even if it's 90 or 95% there with the residents. My question is, does it harm, and would we prefer to table the matter for another 2 weeks while you wrap that up, or is that going to be enough time to allow, more specificity or some additional, verbiage in the contract to settle all the remaining outstanding concerns that residents might have? Is that which would you rather do? I don't want to put a cart before the horse, yet I also understand we have the need to have. Let's make sure that we have a formal agreement. We're all on the same page, and then maybe some of those specifics can be incorporated into the bids and the scope of the work that's actually incorporated as we bid the projects out.
I don't think that we have any hurry. I think that a lot of this work can be done in inclement weather. My thought was, if we did approve this tonight and they are willing to sign it, wonderful, we have an agreement. If we approve it tonight and they're unwilling to sign it, we would be back here we would make some appropriate changes and be back here anyway. So maybe if you're a gambling council, you agree to pass this, because in my opinion the city is okay with how it is today. And then as we discuss it, and if Mr. Hershey has some good clarification things, we can add those to that and bring it back to you to be approved again. So nothing forces them to sign an agreement just because the city adopts it. So
okay, that was another question I had, and I want to make sure that the citizens, anybody's watching tonight or will watch later on, I don't think this is a gambling council, but just to make sure that's out there.
Good clarification.
Trip to Vegas next week. Anyway, does anybody else have any other comments? We have a motion to adopt and a second. Further comment?
Just one comment. I just think that we've been lucky, to be honest with you. We never know what the weather's going to do, and I think that the situation that we have now down there is not acceptable. And I think there's going to be flooding if we just have the wrong kind of weather. I just think that it's important to move forward. It's like the old Chinese saying, talking doesn't cook rice, and I think it's important to remember that. I think I'm in favor of moving forward and then have that discussion, and then we can, it puts a pressure on all the parties to come forward and let's get something done.
Okay.
I agree with that. Second, yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we've had a good discussion on the item, so I'll go ahead and now call for a vote on the matter. We have a motion to adopt the agreement as is and a second. So I'll go ahead and start the voting. Aye.
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 Excellent. The motion is passed. It moves forward. The Rocher Lanes Ponds Owners Agreement is adopted as is, and now we move forward and maybe look at adopting further things. If it has to come back, then it has to come back. Great. Thank you. Appreciate your comments tonight. Okay. Next item on the agenda is item number 8, a development agreement and a request to rezone of 2.84 acres of property at approximately 701 South Main Street from R18, single-family residential, to the HC Healthcare Zoning District. Andy, are you going to start us off with this one?
Property is located on Main Street, just towards the south end of town. You see it highlighted there on the map across from Utah State Experimental Farm, Burton Lane, Nichols Road area. The request is for a assisted living facility, similar to what we have in other parts of town. In our ordinance currently, that's only allowed in the HC zone, which stands for healthcare. The healthcare district, I think the entire language out of the ordinance was included in your packet. We have to show a reasonable accommodation for people with disability, which elderly is considered a disability, so we have to provide places for them to live in a residential environment. So the ordinance specifies that we will show reasonable accommodation for that, but we can do it and should do it through a development agreement that specifies what will be there. So we've also included in the packet and on the agenda the approval of the development agreement. This project has been to the Planning Commission twice. They've negotiated with the developer on the development agreement. You have the development agreement in there. We can go through that if we need to. Outline some of the specifics of what the project would include. At this point, it includes about 2/3 of the property. There's still remaining home with some acreage that will likely be subdivided in the future, but that's not necessarily for tonight's discussion. We're looking at the healthcare facility. This would be the footprint, how it fits. You notice the access would all be off of Main Street. UDOT has indicated they would permit that access as long as it was opposite of Burton Lane, creating a regular four-way intersection. The developer has negotiated with the owner of the property here and made a deal that would allow them to bring that access in, so all the regular access would be off of Main Street. The facility, again, there's the site plan that you saw just previously. Include landscaping around the perimeter to give it a buffer. Generically rooms, I believe it's approximately 75 room facility. Architecture, be a single level as shown here. Quite a bit of architectural feature, make it look and fit into the intent of making it fit into the residential neighborhood. You see the elevation drawings. Those will all be included in the development agreement. A couple other items, there's things like noise and lighting and those kind of things which are also addressed. This was recommended for rezone, and the development agreement was also recommended by the Planning Commission with a couple minor changes which have been incorporated into the copy that you're reviewing tonight, particularly with the lighting, and I don't remember what the other one was off the top of my head, but it was incorporated, so you're seeing what they have recommended. This seems to be a reasonable use for that property. So again, it was recommended by the Planning Commission. This would be the request tonight, is to rezone the property and approve the development agreement.
Okay, thank you for the intro. Any questions of clarification? Any technical questions to be had, Council?
Yeah, I have a question. Can we go back to the first slide that you showed? I think it's just the raw land. Now, my understanding, this whole piece here is zoned right now is R18. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, if this land was developed, I'm assuming this is where the road would come in for the homes. Well, it just died on me, but that's okay. But I'm assuming that's because I guess this doesn't work either.
Wow. I've got several more options.
Well, you know what? We're going to get there. There we go. It's red. You can't see it, but my understanding is they will not allow, like for example here, they're coming onto Main Street, but you're saying if they develop this into housing, they would not allow that to go onto Main Street. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. Yes.
And so what they would do is they would come through here, which would increase the flow of traffic onto this road. This would be the road, the artery that actually goes into the subdivision. And I think at that density would have anywhere between, close to 3 acres. That puts about 4. If you put a PUD, that'd be almost 5. So probably between 12 and 15 houses, roughly, would be in there.
Easily, yes.
Okay. So I guess the thing that I do like about this, having the road come out here and hook into this, I'm assuming that down the road we'll probably end up having a light here, which I think they need to have one now. If you hit rush hour and you're here on Burton trying to turn left, it's like an impossibility. But which is good because that keeps that out of the subdivisions. Anyway, that's just a couple comments I have.
Okay. Any other questions?
I guess I do have a question now, looking at the map again. So the existing buildings that are there, is that a home to the back of the property?
Yes.
There? How do they access their home? I mean, it looks like there's already a road there. It would just need to be widened or made bigger.
At this point, this is technically a driveway.
Okay.
That services that home.
And how about this home? That's already worked out with the owner of the home to have the access to the
That's my
facility?
understanding, yes.
Okay.
I think, in fact, the deal is that they would allow them to purchase or trade them a lot in the back to build a new home on us. I think is what's been indicated.
Thanks. That's all for...
Okay, so the topic of the agenda is the rezone of the property, but there is also a development agreement associated with that.
Yes, the ordinance
rezone.
requires that in HC zone, there be a development agreement accompanying the rezone to make sure it's what we expected.
There have been a number of questions relative to the street and that street access. I can't read that very well. 550 East, is that what that
Yes.
says? If that, would you address that, please, as a matter of that's not necessarily the topic of discussion tonight?
No, as so we look at the site plan of the facility, they're not showing any vehicle access off the rear. All vehicle access would come off the front. So whatever configuration that road is behind it, obviously there'll have to be some sort of road if any of the property needs to be accessed for future development. But the exact configuration is not really highly pertinent to this project. There is one caveat that fire code is going to require fire access to somewhere along the back. Again, whether the road comes in cul-de-sacs or goes all the way through or as a private lane or any of the options that may be considered, that could accommodate that emergency vehicle access.
Eventually? Or will that...
If there's not a subdivision submitted in time, again, the property's all under single ownership. If they have to use this driveway as emergency access until the property's subdivided, that's very feasible.
Okay. All right. We've asked the technical questions. Was Mr. Whitaker here tonight? Or
He is
anybody
present, yes.
like to come and present? Give your perspective as the applicant?
Sure. My name's Dave Whitaker. I live in the house that is behind this property, to the east of the property right now. The lane is my private driveway we just discussed. And actually, Mr. Thompson's done a great job of presenting it. I really don't have anything to add, but I do appreciate your consideration and be happy to answer any further questions that you may have.
Council, does anybody have any other technical questions relative to the rezone and the development agreement to present to Mr. Whitaker?
Thank you. I don't know if it's a technical question or not, but just my sort of understanding as I'm looking at this, and perhaps somebody could confirm, Mr. Whitaker or Andy. But because this is an assisted living, I noticed you're talking about 75 units. There clearly isn't 75 parking spots there, though, right? So I'm thinking that most of the residents will be at a stage in their life where they need some assistance in their life, and so they wouldn't be driving cars necessarily. And so the traffic, even though there's a lot of units, would probably be minimal, especially when compared with the across Nichols Lane, all the apartment complexes that are there actually in Fruit Heights, and the traffic that they may generate. That this would be a relatively minor impact compared to the number of units.
Absolutely. When we were deciding what to do with this property, we took all that into account. I had a couple of other options that could have probably been a little more lucrative than this, and my wife's comment was, "You can't do that to the neighbors." So we considered this. We thought it was a great use for the property. It's a type 2 assisted living. There are the people in here do not drive. The parking spaces are for staff and for the visitors. Unfortunately, you don't have that many visitors except for possibly Christmas Day, and it's kind of a reality of our society. But the required ordinance would be in the mid-30s. We would like to add a few more, and we're still looking at the possibility of adding a few more stalls, just to make sure that we take any pressure off. We know that we can't park on State Road, and so that this site plan might adjust to add 4 to 6 more stalls someplace. They would be on the front there, though.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Yeah, I was going to ask, that was one of my questions, was how many stalls, how many parking stalls does this have? And you've already answered that, in the 30-ish range?
Exactly.
And you're looking to add a few more?
Right.
Okay.
Just one comment. I knew this was going to be on the agenda, and I'm all over the valley, and I do know some of the buildings that you've done in the past. I actually went by a few of them. I know the one down in the far west area. I went by there a couple days ago. I believe it was Monday, and I counted the cars because that was a concern as well. They only had 5 cars there in the parking lot. I'm not sure how big the unit was. I don't think it's quite as big as this one.
No, it's got 36 units in it, so it's just less than half. And that's probably all staff at that point.
Yeah.
So I would imagine staff would be upwards of 10 at any time. Actually, the operator's here. Am I correct in that? So, yeah, he's...
Sorry.
Yep, come on up, Nate.
Yeah, come on up.
Yeah, my name is Nate Boswell. We worked out an agreement with Dave to... I'll be the operator of the community. And with this size building, this size community, we have one currently in West Jordan, and it is 65 apartments. We have 28 parking stalls, and at full capacity, we have 14 to 15 staff members. And so, majority of the time, it'll be less than that, but at full capacity, during the day, it'll be about 15 staff members. So we've been working with Dave and the site plan and the architects to make sure we can accommodate the parking. Because again, the last thing we want as operators is to have it inconvenient for the visitors to park. So it's really important for us to make sure they have good parking to come into our community.
I appreciate that.
Quick question. Thanks for coming, Nate.
Yeah.
Where would service trucks or, supply trucks, those kinds of things, where would they would also obviously enter in from the front.
Yeah.
But where will you have your loading docks or whatever it is you use?
Oh. Yeah, if I may. So
apparently it was a sale on laser pointers at the dollar store.
Battery changed.
We do have a few other properties at this same floor plan. And it's...
If you want, you can go ahead and walk over there and point to it.
What we'll do is that the majority, we have a food truck. It's a Nicholas or a Cisco. That's really the major service that provides food for our community and for our residents. And so we would just make sure that this porte-cochere carport is large enough that they can either come in here and go through, or they can do, as you can see, this T parking where they can pull up and then back out and then come in. We can regulate what time that truck comes in. So if we want to say, hey, you need to come in before 6 a.m., then we can make sure they come in before 6 a.m. to make sure that there's not any cars in the parking lot. But what we'll do is we'll design a sidewalk that actually comes in here and have a door here that'll cross our hallway. I guess it'd be about right there, a little bit wider than I thought, but we just make sure we come across here and come in our back door into our kitchen. So that's what we've done in our other communities, and it's worked out fine.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Any other technical questions? Mr. Adams, welcome to the meeting. If you have any, we're in the middle of agenda item number 7. Sorry, of 8 right now. if you have any, we're talking technical questions right now about the development agreement and the assisted living facility on South Main Street.
I don't want to be disrespectful. I haven't been here, so I don't want to duplicate any comments. A few, and if they're duplicated, just tell me to move on. Not so much to do with the development, but I mean, we're talking about a rezone, right? And we're getting into the minutia.
The rezone is on the agenda, but also a development agreement is associated with the rezone.
Okay. Has it already been talked about, the 60 versus 75 beds? That's what's been brought to all of our attention through emails from the public. Has that already been addressed? If it has, then I can rest my case. But
I mean, it's been mentioned that it's a
60
75
originally, and now it's 75. Is that right, sir?
Well, I don't think. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but we haven't really worked on the exact number of apartments. It'll be around that. We're hoping it'll be around that 70 apartment standpoint, but we haven't. Correct me if I'm wrong. JZW, the architect, hasn't specifically said, "Hey, we can get 75 apartments for this site."
We asked what's the maximum number that we could fit on this, and they came up with 75. We originally had a drawing that up in the northeast corner had a parking lot. That didn't work for the neighbors to have a parking lot adjacent to their home. So at the time, we didn't know if we could get a complete UDOT access. And since then, we were able to get a complete UDOT access, and we're able to lengthen that upper arm back to the east.
Would you mind standing up to the microphone, Mr. Whitaker? Sorry.
Sure. Did you guys catch that? Should I repeat it?
We caught it, but I don't think the recording got it.
Oh, okay.
So.
Sure. So when we were in prior, the first time with planning and zoning, it was 60. Planning and zoning had several people comment that they did not like the parking lot in that northeast corner. So with the change and UDOT's approval to have 100% access off of Main Street, that allowed us to extend that arm. I don't know that the operators are going to want 75, but it will be somewhere between the 70 and 75 range at this point. Planning and zoning were made aware of that at the last meeting, that we had increased that number. And so hopefully we're not catching anybody off guard there.
Well, and that's directly because it sounds like the extension of that arm of that wing of the building.
That one right there,
yeah.
Exactly.
I should have started my comment, though, with a disclosure that I know Mr. Dave Whitaker and have a good friendship with him. The amount of scrutiny that I take around these parts, I definitely want to put that out there. So I know Mr. Dave, Mr. Whitaker. That's the main email that's been received that I've seen come to this body. And and not being here for call to the public, was there any mentions?
There's not.
So that's come, and I think that the 100% UDOT is great. I think that satisfies probably over 50% of what I've read out of the concerns from the people. They didn't want dumpster companies coming into the back, or services coming, or ambulances. So that's awesome. And if you don't mind, this might be rhetorical. Forgive me for being late. But is it a Rambler style building then? It's not a two-story.
So Andy's got, and a part of that development agreement has some elevations, and
cool.
And there's
That's
a rendering right there to give you a feel. It's a one-story building. The dormers that you see there don't actually go to a room. They're just there to break up that roof line.
Just make it look nice, yeah.
Just make it look a little better.
Make it look like a home.
So that's the idea. It is a home for the elderly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I don't think the number of rooms is specified in the development agreement as far as...
The development agreement says it will be in general compliance with these exhibits that we've looked at. So if they reduce the number of rooms by 5, the floor plan's going to still look essentially in all material aspects like this looks. So if they do anything drastic, then they would have to come back and ask for an amendment to the development agreement.
Okay. All right. We've had our technical questions section. I will go ahead and now invite a motion, and then the council can have further discussion if a motion is made and seconded.
Well, I'll move that we approve the development agreement and rezone of 2.84 acres of property from an R18 to an HC zoning district.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Page. Is there a second?
I will second that motion.
Second by Mr. Garn. All right. So we now have the opportunity for the council to discuss the matter one at a time. Go ahead and start down here on the left with Mr. Garn. Remember, according to our rules, we have up to 5 minutes to discuss.
I think I'll just comment that this seems like a good location for this with the exit on Main Street. There's really not that much traffic, though, or concern. I don't think I'm too concerned, to go to the fundamental concern of what are the impacts on neighbors for this type of facility. And I can't think of how much difference it would make, the difference between 60 and 75, when there really isn't a lot of traffic, a lot of being generated parking spaces. I can't really think of what the impact would be, so I don't think I'm concerned about the number of units too much, but I'm grateful that we have places in Kaysville where the elderly, when they need that help, can have a place to be cared for and to live.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Garn. Mr. Adams, did you have your time to make comments now?
Well, and this might be technical too, but so does the development agreement, are we setting a max number of rooms? Do we have an ordinance on that? Do we have a calculation for room per square footage of property, or is there anything like that in the zone? Or could it go up to 100 beds? These are all just neutral questions, informative, that we ought to know.
Who are you asking that? I'm not.
I need to ask you, I guess. You're the chairman.
I would invite a staff member to go ahead and answer that. I don't believe the development agreement certainly doesn't specify that. But the development agreement is including and incorporating a design that incorporates what we've seen here, which appears to have a maximum of about 70 to 75 rooms.
That's correct. So the floor plan is part of the development agreement. If it changes in any material aspect, then it would have to come back and be reapproved. There is no ordinance of Kaysville City that says how big or how many there can be. I think there are some regulations with the state. If you'd like us to put the number in the development agreement that says shall not exceed this many rooms, that could be done as well.
Okay.
And Carl and Dave, these are just, we have to represent all people, right? So these are just passive. I want to make sure they're addressed. The property right now is all one parcel, all the homes and barns and everything. It's already subdivided out. This is already subdivided off.
No, it's not.
Or if I probably need to go through the chairman, or I'll get in trouble. If you want to.
What are you asking of Andy?
Currently, does the plat include like your home, Dave, your barns?
No, none of that is a part of it.
So the yellow line is a separate plat right now already?
The portion that we're discussing is within the yellow line only. There are 2 1/2 actually parcel numbers involved here. The 2 on the front, we will move that parcel line to match the line when it's approved, and have still 2 parcels in there. My understanding is if we do something different than that, and Andy can correct me, we'd have to do a subdivision plat rather than just a lot line readjustment. So we're going to just do a lot line readjustment, and when it's constructed and built, we may at that point combine them. But and then we are working currently on a subdivision behind there, and you will probably see that within a few weeks, and that would provide the emergency vehicle access for the fire per Chief Larkin's request. And and you'll see that shortly.
And that the fire department, the emergency services comment, that would be to service the subdivision. That's not the assisted living center.
That we need to get a road between the two other roads at some point, but that'll be in a further discussion. And for now, just that road there would provide the fire access. My driveway would provide that fire access that's needed to the back of that property. But long before we're ever looking for occupancy on this building, there will be a road completed of some sort, depending on how you folks approve it. So.
And let me garner a little bit of background to that comment. The background of that comment just comes from emails and concerns that have come to this entire body, group emails that have come. And in the emails that have come have said, hey, we'd like to know if you guys advance this forward. You know, people are interested to know, and this might be off the topic of discussion or the agenda item, and you can curb me if you like, Mayor Pro Tem. But I think the people like some clarity. They want to know, is this road going to connect with Whisper Creek? You know, they'd like to see some of those things is all. And, you know, I think that's kind of helpful to know what's going on with the whole picture, to at least keep the people informed. And
sure. I think most of the people are informed. I might defer to Andy to answer that, if you would, please. Andy, he's seen what we propose, and we're working on having that ready to bring into you here shortly.
So just before we get into that too much, we did have a discussion, and you weren't here at that time, but at the very beginning of this particular agenda item, that we're talking about the rezone of the yellow portion here, and the road concerns, many of the road concerns that have been addressed that we've all seen will be taken up basically in a subsequent subdivision item that will be coming in the coming weeks. So that item was discussed. There will be a road. The only concern we have right now as far as the rezone of this property for the healthcare district is that Chief Larkin made a request to make sure that northeast section of the proposed assisted living facility would be able to be accessible via your driveway essentially. Absolutely. At this time. Right. For that back portion should an emergency occur. The rest of the assisted living facility is fine to be addressed and to be accessed by our emergency services from the front, as is all the rest of the traffic.
That's correct.
So for purposes of this particular rezone, the road concern is centered around the access for emergency vehicles to be able to support or to provide assistance to that one section of the proposed assisted living facility.
Thank you for the clarification. That's a bonus to me. That wasn't the root of my question. I appreciate the information. The root of the question, where we are talking about rezoning half of one parcel, one recorded parcel, I think that lends a little credibility to discuss what the other half of that parcel might look like in the future. Because the curved line currently, as I read this, is one parcel, and we're talking about letting a third, or ish of that parcel go into another zone. And so then we have the rest of that parcel that we don't know exactly what's going to happen with. And the concern of the people, I don't think, is necessarily fire and ambulance. I think everybody wants fire and ambulance to have access to everything. I think the concern is the flow through going to Whisper Creek, the barns being bulldozed and that tying in. None of this stems from a personal nature. But I think that those kind of things deserve some form of addressing, and where it ties in is the fact that is a parcel number that we're going to let rezone half of the parcel number. Is that?
He's got 1 minute.
Well, he took some of the time.
I stopped. I paused. I resumed.
Took some of the time.
I know.
That's fine. So that would be the concern. I just want to convey it. That's all. It's not coming from a personal note. I just want to make sure that's put out there. You guys can discuss it at will. Take it into your under advisement. If I got 1 minute, the last thing was, I guess mainly the flow through, the lighting. I'm sure that's been addressed before I got here, making sure that doesn't shine into other people's windows. People had concern about the head count. I don't think anybody was upset extremely. So those are the concerns I've seen. I'd just like to make sure that we're addressing, to be responsible to all parties involved, citizenry and owner developers. So be responsible to all of you. So those would be the main items.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Adams. I will just, the comments I'll make are, I know Mr. Whitaker and know Mr. Boswell, actually, and I am familiar with the projects, several of the projects, the assisted living facilities that this group has put together, and they are very high quality and high quality places from an architectural perspective, but they are also, and there's a reason that they can build these things, is that people are going to them, and people enjoy living in them. They take good care of the senior citizens who reside in their facilities, and obviously, given the fact that there's even an assisted living facility just kitty corner from this across Main Street with, I don't know how many beds that one has, but it's it's probably not this size, but it's a beautiful facility, and I'm assuming it must be at full capacity, and now there's additional there's a need. We have a number of senior citizens in some areas of our city that would love to remain in Kaysville and live near their kids, and I think it's an appropriate use for this property to be an assisted living facility. So, without further ado, I'll pass it to Mr. Page.
Yeah, I think everything's been covered pretty well. I'd just like to say I really think that this is a nice fit, being on Main Street. Just like I mentioned earlier, having all the traffic to this go out on Main Street instead of going through the subdivisions is a big plus. I know that there's a big demand, and as time goes on, there's a huge need for this type of facility, especially in this area. And I think that it helps service those people that will use it, and it's a tremendous opportunity for them as well. And I think it's good. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, excellent. With those comments, the council comment period is ended. So we have a motion on the table and a seconded motion to approve the development agreement and to rezone the 2.84 acres of property from R18 to the healthcare zoning district. Just for the public's concern, there are additional phases of this development process which will be coming, and those are plat approvals that will be coming in the future for future council meetings, which we will see. And when a lot of those, or a number of those concerns specifically surrounding roads and parcels and those kinds of things as plat approval, that phase will come on a subsequent meeting. I'm not sure exactly when, Mr. Thompson, or if we have that
it's not been
queued up.
submitted. It's not been submitted at this point.
So there is still a number of steps left in the process for getting this to the point where they can actually start building. So with that in mind, we'll go ahead and call for a vote on the action. So, Mr. Adams, we'll start with you.
Due to long-standing relationships with Mr. Whitaker, I don't want any kind of, hearsay. I'm abstaining. Sorry. That would be a no vote.
That's certainly your choice. I don't know that you need to do that. You don't appear to have any kind of financial obligation.
I've done business with Mr. Whitaker in the past. It's been a great relationship, and I've had enough said about my name. I'm abstaining. Thank you.
Fair enough. Aye.
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 All right. The motion passes 3-0 with one abstention. So the development agreement and rezone are adopted. So thank you very much. We'll move now to item number 9 on the agenda, and that is the Sunset Equestrian Estates Plat 18, Acceptance of Improvements. Mr. Thompson.
Sunset Equestrian Estates continuing to build. Phase 18 is highlighted here just south of the church off of Angel Street. Those improvements have been completed and inspected by our Public Works Department and recommended that we accept the improvements with the normal requirements of 10% warranty, bond, and 1-year period.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thompson. This is an item, or the type of an item that comes up fairly frequently on the council agenda. Does anybody have a technical question relative to this particular item? Okay, not hearing any, I'll entertain a motion.
Yeah, I'll move that we accept the improvements of Sunset Equestrian Estates, Plat 18 for Symphony Homes.
We have a motion to adopt or to accept the improvements of Plat 18 by Mr. Page, seconded by Mr. Garn. Would that, just a technical question or a clarification, does that include the requirements of the 10% warranty and the warranty period?
I think that's included in it.
Okay, just
has to be,
just
right?
double checking.
It's the 1-year warranty period, right, Andy?
That's the standard.
The standard.
Yeah, it has to. Okay.
Standard.
Okay, we have a motion to accept and a second to accept. Is there any desire to have further comment by the council, or?
Is the punch list in the packet?
No, the punch list is complete or would not be ready for acceptance.
Is it in the packet, though?
It's not.
Okay. Because I've addressed that before, and I believe I asked for them to be put in the packet, so. Okay. That's the only comment I have.
Okay, then I'll go ahead and ask for a vote. I'll start with myself. Aye.
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 No punch list, it's a nay.
The motion is adopted 3-1. Okay, moving on to to agenda item number 10, minutes. I don't believe we have a set of minutes in the agenda for tonight.
If you didn't have time to review, we can certainly do that at next meeting.
Okay, I didn't, by the time I refreshed my, resynced anyway, it didn't have minutes in the agenda, so I haven't had a chance to read them.
I haven't either.
Members, have you had a chance to review minutes?
No.
For this one? Okay, I have not had a chance to review the minutes because they weren't in the packet when I synced it.
I have not either. It was not in the packet, and I couldn't update it.
I would,
Next time.
let's include those minutes next time. So we'll go ahead and move on to the calendar, the 11th item on the agenda. Maria, apparently you've got something, a special meeting.
I do. So we need to meet on a special meeting on the 24th of August. That should be just a real quick meeting. If we could do that maybe at 6:30 for 30 minutes, because I think Planning Commission is at 7. But it's for it's the official canvass to accept the election results.
The primary results.
The primary results. And anyway, it's the only time we could do it. There was a time frame. So anyway, that's what we need to do, if that's all right.
Council, we have a suggestion to meet next week on Thursday, August 24th at 6:30, you're saying? And the canvassing of election results, as you recall, we've done it, I don't know if we've done it actually with this council, now that I think about it. We may not have. It's typically a very briff process.
A report, you just accept
Right. I mean, maybe we'll be here 10 minutes or so.
really quickly.
Yeah. So it's a very brief thing. So is there anybody who has an objection to meeting next Thursday night to canvass the results? This is something we're required to do. So
Potential schedule conflict with family interests, but I'm sure there'll be a quorum here, so there's no problem. I'm sure it's...
You're saying you cannot make it, or
not
could we
affirmative.
schedule it for a time when you could?
Can't confirm or deny, but yeah, I mean, I don't think it's an issue, right? It's not, we don't need every member of the body, right?
We just need a quorum, that's for sure. But I mean, I'm happy to look for a time that you could be here if that's.
I think if Maria's taking the time to plan that out, it should be fine.
Okay. 6:30 on the 24th.
On my end, anyway.
Works for me.
Does that work, Councilmember Garn?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Then we'll go ahead and put that for 6:30 on the 24th, and we'll canvass the primary election result at that time. Anything else on the agenda on the calendar that we need to discuss? Mr. Scott, anything? We have the upcoming city and towns league meetings in Salt Lake City. The I think that's the first week of September, right?
I think it's the third week of September.
13th, isn't it?
It's the second week in September, so, okay. Anyway, so, all right, not hearing any other calendar items, we'll go into council member reports. As you recall, our rules give us 3 minutes to report on any issues or any things from our assignments on the council. Start with Mr. Garn.
Yeah, I had opportunity to attend at least part of youth court last night, and I just want to say how much I appreciate all of the youth that participate in that program and also the adult leaders that organize it. I'm always so impressed with what they do and the opportunity that is for young people to have an alternative to juvenile court. So looking forward to that starting up again with the school year.
Thank you. Mr. Adams?
I've got a quick question. On the agenda item concerning the ponds in West Kaysville, could someone inform me the vote of that?
Yeah, I'm happy to. No, it was voted, adopted. The agreement was adopted. A couple, or at least one of the neighbors did mention that they thought they were, in the 90% range of being there, but they seemed pleased that the city has adopted or agreed or adopted the agreement, and they can continue to work that out. If there are any modifications to the agreement, then it will come back before the council to be adopted.
Do our rules not allow an option to go back on an agenda item for, as the meeting progresses? I think
there is the rule to reconsider, the motion to reconsider. It has to be brought up by someone who's in the majority vote on the item to reconsider an item that's been voted upon. I think it's for a subsequent meeting, though. I believe the rules stipulate for a subsequent meeting. It can be in this meeting. It can be in this meeting? Okay. But the motion to reconsider is, as I recall, by according to the rules, and Mr. Parliamentarian, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe you're right. But as stipulates that someone from the majority who adopted the agreement would need to make the motion to reconsider that.
Okay. No worries. I'll just make a council member comment about it then.
Okay.
My concerns on that, so that it's on the record, are pond number 1 in the agreement. You guys, or this body, the city has now agreed to dredge it again. Well, pond number 1 is one of the ponds that was created in 2014, I think it was-ish, December of 14. It was just created. Why is the city spending tax dollars to dredge it out again? What are we doing there? We have massive amounts of roadways that are in deterioration. We have massive amounts of safe walking routes to school for children that are in bad condition. Why are we dredging out a pond that we just, in my personal opinion, that we just constructed with tax dollars? Why is it being dredged a few years later? And then I'll just ask staff in the hallway later. I'd like to know, it defined in the agreement that pond number 2, that the southwesterly portion of pond number 2 would be dredged. I'd like a solid line, a surveyed line of where that's going to be, because that stems into, the northerly portion of that pond is owned by a former council member, and a lot of those ponds were created in 2014. So I'd like to see fine lines on that. I can visit with you afterwards. But my concerns there was a few agreements, even on the people's side, a few things in that agreement that I thought, I guess you guys have passed it already. It looked like it puts a little bit of burden on them. I just want folks in the city to know I'm not in agreement on that issue yet. I think there's too much money. I don't think we have a total gross estimate on what we're going to be spending down there. And I think there's many more needs in the city that come before that. Roadways, deteriorating, all kinds of issues, safe walking routes and things of that nature. Also, with school coming into full swing, I'd like to hear, if it's not possible to hear it, that's fine. I'd like to know what kind of collaboration we've had with the high school for the parking issues. What kind of, are the students well prepped? Do they understand the new rules in town? Are they ready to go? And what have we done as a city, to collaborate with the school to help that program go forth and perhaps even help really cure the problem, which I don't think the permit thing cured the problem for the students. So.
Okay, thank you. As far as a council member report, we already had, from me anyway, we already had Tammy Worston mention the pickleball tournament, Kaysville's first pickleball tournament. So I won't rehash that other than to say that is actually a significant revenue generator for the community with all those people, like 200 and something signed up to participate in the tournament. Anyway, not that we look at it that way necessarily. It was just simply it was a very positive event. It brought a lot of people together, many from our community, but also from several other communities, not even just in Davis County. And it was well attended and well put off. Our staff really did a great job on that. And Tammy, you were one of the volunteers at that, so thank you for your effort in that regard. The only other council member report I have is just this is more for, I guess, folks, not too many of the folks in the audience would this apply to, but maybe folks who may watch later on or watching online now. But the Youth City Council is getting, as school is starting to get, is about to get back into action. The Youth City Council will also be getting back into full swing, and we have a mayor of the Youth City Council that was selected from among her peers on the Youth City Council, Emma Francis, and she is doing a great job. But if there are other youths, primarily high school, but I think we've gone down to 9th grade, and I'm looking over at Mr. Garn because he works on the Youth City Council with me, but we've gone down to as young as 9th grade to participate in the Youth City Council. So we look forward to recruiting some additional members of the Youth City Council for this next school year, and look forward to a great year with them. So, Mr. Page.
Yeah, I'm fine tonight.
Okay, excellent. That wraps up agenda item number 12. Agenda item number 13 is the consideration of a closed meeting pursuant to Utah Code to discuss a strategy, or to have a strategy session to discuss pending or reasonably imminent litigation. There's only a few reasons, according to the Utah State Code, that we can go into a closed session, and this is one of them, to discuss pending or reasonably imminent litigation. And so I would welcome, however, to have maybe a brief 5-minute break before we go into closed session. So, but would invite a motion according, as such, before we get into that.
Do we need to close this meeting first? Or?
Not close it. No, we go into it from this meeting.
You need to have a motion to go into closed session.
Yeah, we need to have a motion to go into closed session, and I would invite us to have that go into closed session after a brief break.
I'll motion we go into closed session with a 5-minute break.
Excellent.
So.
I'll second that motion.
Before you do that, could I, my name's Dean Wall again, in case you don't know, but the ice cream was great, and I just finished cleaning it up, so you guys missed out.
So our break is missing out.
Your break is ice cream.
So. You didn't leave me one?
What's that?
You didn't leave me one?
Sorry.
We missed out.
If the city wants to use it sometime, they're more than willing to use it. Okay?
Thank you, Dean. I did. Council, that was a motion by Councilmember Adams and a second by Councilmember Snell to go into closed session after brief. We'll say at 9 o'clock we'll start our closed session. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you very much.
Parliamentarian, the teleprompter too.
He did prompt on that one.
This could be 2 hours and 15 minutes. Yeah, it was nice. Beautiful.
I know where there's a whole bunch of chocolate.
Shoot.
Oh,
That's
man.
probably very
I'll
unrealistic.
I'll take 9 all day. Yeah, it's a beautiful place. It was really good. It's fun to have some power commission. Really great. Met with them and